we'll go back up in the Q&A and see. The first one is specifically for Klaus. What is your perspective on the allowable legal framework for tokenized assets in Europe and the US? What is allowable right now?
Maybe it's best to give that one to Andrew.
Andrew, then.
I'm more than happy to answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously a lot of the stuff that I said before in regards to the US, that's kind of a mirror image of some of the tokenization processes that are going on in Europe. It's a little bit more lax from a country to country perspective. The EU has definitely done more due diligence in regards to addressing potential conflicts with traditional securities regulations compared to what the federal government and governmental agencies have done in the United States. And so, I mean, as of right now, if you take kind of all of the exemptions that I was talking about before, or the non-exemption path, and layer that into the EU context, basically it's very, very akin, except for the fact that there are a little bit more different exemptions in regards to offerings. And so there's not an outright securities filing requirement in certain jurisdictions under the EU. And again, it's all really going to kind of revert back to what the economic interests are that the token's representing. And so if at the end of the day, it is very akin to a representation of, say, equity in the company itself, then you're most likely going to just have kind of a similar process that you would have if you were based in the US. Again, I think that I wanted to highlight from the EU perspective is that they're just a little bit more progressive. And so it's easier to deduce, definitely from a compliance perspective, kind of the streamlined process, just because there are certain countries in the EU that have actually legally recognized, say, digital assets as assets themselves. And so there's a little bit more legislative action in that context. But at a high level perspective, it's going to be very similar paths if the digital asset is in of itself close to being a security.
Very nice. Does anybody have a follow-up to that? No, quite thorough, very nicely. Then we have one from Edward Mason, and I guess the full question is, if you have a project that's on the DigiShares platform, will voting rights then transfer to happen on the DigiShares platform?
I think that one is maybe also even for Andrew. From my side, I would say no, they don't transfer to the DigiShares platform. The DigiShares platform would facilitate the voting. I think that's all.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's also going to kind of the legal differentiation of like the white label service that DigiShares is offering, and then the clients that are utilizing that, and pinpointing exactly who the third party is that's facilitating the transactions. Because if you're utilizing the efficiency component of the DigiShares white label service, and also simultaneously you have elements of control over kind of the distribution of those voting rights, as well as the management and maintenance of those voting rights, then it's not necessarily going to transfer unless obviously there are actions that are taken on behalf of the issuer. That's definitely something that people should decide early on, because what you don't want is disgruntled token holders that aren't fully understanding the process in terms of how that voting transfer actually occurs.
All right. Then we have one from Edward Mason. If I have a project with multiple properties, should each property be a sub-asset? I guess this one would be for Dan and Sarah.
The way we're doing it with the restricted assets, we're using main assets for each property. So I think you could do that sub asset for each property, but that's not what we're doing.
Okay, so you could also bundle them together.
Right.
Right. Okay, so basically it's up to you who own the asset and issue the token, I guess is the answer. Does anybody have a follow-up to that or any comments?
Yeah,
Sean, please. Yes.
So there's some advantages to using sub assets. One advantage is that it came from the original main asset issuer. So if you already done, let's say 3 or 4 projects, and so that kind of the trust has been built up in that main asset issuer, it feels like you kind of build that trust or brand in that, and so there's some advantage to that. Other than that, sub assets actually become root assets of themselves, meaning they can have their own sub assets. The main differentiator is that they can only be created by that main issuer asset, right, from that original root. And a lot of times that's good for building a brand, a trust brand that you know it's been, you know, like you've got lots of projects that have happened under that brand that have worked, that you know that have been successful, that it can be used for that. And so that's one advantage. You might do that. It has some cost advantages as well, but the main thing I think would actually be, because the cost is pretty trivial in the context of, you know, a property, for example. So the main thing would be just kind of building that brand and that trust that every asset under this main asset is successful at work, or is trustworthy.
All right. Any follow-ups? No. Next one from Todd Miller. Are there any asset-backed tokens from DigiShares being traded on the secondary market? And can we give any examples? I guess for you, Klaus.
Not yet. We're working on the first project actually in collaboration with DigiShares A, US real estate company called MarketSpace. It was announced a few weeks back. So this token will be listed within a few months, I think. But that's the first one that we're bringing to market.
All right, very straightforward. Then we have one. How do rates and tokenizing real estate differ? Anyone care to answer that?
I can take that. Yeah, so a REIT, I mean, technically you can tokenize a REIT. The major difference from my perspective is that you have to distribute 80 to 90% of the profits back to shareholders, comparatively to, say, a fund that manages a real estate investment portfolio, or saying owning individual properties through an SPV. There is less of a managerial component in the REIT context. And so that's kind of an overall factor in the decision-making process. So I've found that in the industry, REITs are less, not advantageous, but less popular.
All right. Are there any follow-ups to that? No? Okay, moving on. If you have a white label platform from any country with no ATS, where do you start with being legal in the USA for real estate tokenization? Any takers?
Sure, yeah. So if I understand the question right, they're asking what the legal compliance is if they're operating in the States. So, I mean, it's a complex question, but also it depends on what exactly they're offering. So if you take the traditional model where, say, you're taking like a percentage-based fee off of the amount that they raise, and you're facilitating the transactions, then you're going to have to start with a BD application with FINRA and then go for the ATS. All
right, so there's a process to go through there. Another one from Brandon. He's quite active. That's good. What is your first recommendation for bringing tokenization of real estate into your country? He doesn't say who this was for. Look at companies in which you are tokenizing and compare against laws in your country. That's difficult. Who wants to take an example? I think maybe he means the US, because most European countries follow European law.
I guess the question is, what do you do if you are the first tokenization project in your country, right? And there's no legal legislation around it. So we have several times in situations like that, and they're working with the regulators. So they have to work with, of course, a lawyer like Andrew Bull, and then also get in contact with the local regulator and possibly get into a sandbox process to make their way through.
Yeah, so you have to find out what the current laws are that apply to you, and what sort of guess what's expected for the future. All right. So here's one, I think this is specifically for the USA. How much should I spend for Rec CF or A+? Does anybody have any answer about the costs?
I have the answer, but it's pretty complex.
It's very complex. Okay, so if you want the
Two
answer
drastically
to
different
that,
things.
Teresa, I think you need to contact Andrew Bull, but be careful, he might send you an invoice.
That's right.
So I think this next one is for Sarah and Dan. How much is the quarterly dividend from investing in your real estate? Is there a market for small returns?
Oh, the quarterly dividend, well,
Yeah.
we've got, so if rent's 2,500 and so 7,500 minus taxes and an 8% property management fee are the big expenses. So if you want to do the math on that, that'd be about it. So
That would be
tax,
about
yeah, and what did taxes be on that house? Probably 8,000 a year.
Yeah, and I guess the answer here is again that all of this will be public for potential investors. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, very well. So for everybody who's watching and who's super interested, we have so many questions for Sarah and Dan. Most of these questions will be part of their public marketing material and investor material. So go and check them out on their website, which is almost live. Yes, very good. Another one for you, just to continue on. Will you use tokenization to raise money for acquisitions and builds? A future planning question. What's in the future?
Yes, that is the goal here, is to purchase as many single family homes as possible.
Okay, so you're building up your portfolio.
Yep.
Yeah, very good. Okay, and we have one from Rafael. He says he's from Venezuela. Any of you know real estate tokenization startups in Latin America? It's quite interesting. I actually don't know of any. So any panelists know of any real estate tokenization projects happening in Latin America?
I do. We know of several.
Yeah. So there is one.
There's a lot going on. We have a couple signed up, but we have at least 10 in the pipeline. Yeah, so that's a lot.
Okay, but nothing that's public information yet, or?
Not right now, at least. So he can contact us, and yeah, we can say more.
Yeah. Okay. So if you would like to learn about tokenization, real estate tokenization startups in Latin America, does anybody know where he would go to learn about that? I guess he's interested. No, there are no questions. Rafael, you have to Google. Is there any documentations you guys are aware of for someone completely new to real estate tokenization? How does one start tokenizing local real estate? I can actually answer that. There are some fantastic blog articles written by Klaus Skåning on our blog. You should go check them out. It's beginner's guides and everything you need to know. Anybody else have some input for that? No? Right, don't be afraid, you guys, to mark when you want to speak. We have one here from Nitin. Can we sell issued tokens on other exchanges, or are they all buy hold? If we can sell, do we need to figure out ourselves, or is that the future in DigiShares?
Yeah, so there's the bulletin board marketplace within the system that you can use immediately. Then, as mentioned before, also we can integrate with regulated security token exchanges such as T0 to allow your tokens to be listed there. So it's definitely something we can support.
All right. Next one is an open question. How are people using DAOs? Can anybody talk about DAOs and how they're being used by different projects? No takers? All right, moving on. Laura is asking, and this is for Andrew. Yeah, you're still here. Andrew, when it comes to jurisdiction selection for US product, are you seeing overseas selections? If yes, why? And is this something you can accomplish as a US attorney, or would you need a local attorney as well? Cayman Islands is emerging as a blockchain hub. What would be the advantages, disadvantages for overseas selection? It's a long question.
Yeah, so I don't know if I would necessarily weigh in on the product component of the question, but there are certain jurisdictions that if you say were to go offer your digital asset, like let's assume you've created your entity in the Caymans, you have to report under VASP, which is their legislation that was passed last year. And if you're offering it from that jurisdiction and then targeting other jurisdictions, certain jurisdictions require that you submit your offering documents to the local regulators so that they can just take a review, or other ones just require disclosures added into the documents, and it totally varies across the entire world. So, I mean, there are certain instances like Singapore that it can be very helpful to have local representation that comes in, because a lot of times they have intimate knowledge or relationships with the local regulators, and they can kind of streamline that process. But again, it's really going to be jurisdiction dependent.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Are American investors interested in European or Asian assets from the point of view of investing in token securities of companies that own real estate? Any takers on that?
I'll hop in on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that every investor, their preference and consideration is case by case, but I actually see and hear of a lot more of the opposite, and that would be foreign investors wanting to invest in America or American specific real estate assets. I would say that there are definitely American investors that like to do the opposite, but just from a simple communication and positioning standpoint, it's really more vice versa, but it can't nearly speak for everyone.
All right, well, I think that was a fair reply. Does anybody have any follow-ups for that? No? Next question. Yeah, okay, this one. Kay, you ask a question, which countries are your main focus at the moment and why? And you have to be more specific. Who was that question for? We have a question.
I think it was for me, because it was an old question from the beginning. So I'll just take it. So DigiShares has a global focus. We have clients on almost all continents and legal partners also in many different countries. But I would say actually the US is probably the main focus now. This is where we see the biggest interest and where we see also the easiest jurisdiction, all things considered, to work with. So
all right. We have one for Sarah now and Dan. So what is your specific ideal investors and what marketing approach are you taking? So you talked about the marketing company that you're using, and yeah.
Well, we'd like to work after we get everything set up. We'd like to work on Reg CF and be able to have maybe target to younger investors, because it is people that want to invest in real estate, right? That might not have 100% cash to put down. Well, usually don't. Are finding it really hard to purchase real estate.
It is a common conversation I have with investors wanting to get started in real estate. So that would also give them, the opportunity to invest without a large amount of money.
Yeah. And are you excluding any types of investors at all, or are you open to everybody?
Well, we're Reg D to start with right now, so accredited.
All right. Well, thank you very much to everybody. That's all of the questions. I think we went through quite a lot today, also because there were so many questions for each speaker. So thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to all of our attendees. You were extra curious today, which is fantastic. That makes a webinar so much better. So thank you to everybody, and have a great week.